we're going over what you should do before you open an Etsy shop. Welcome to the Sewing Report. I'm Jen. This channel is all about making sewing and crafts fun and approachable, and I wanted to talk all about Etsy in this episode. I did a few videos about my own Etsy shop. I've been on Etsy for about a year and a half. It's been a really interesting and I think good experience for me, but there's a lot of things about running an Etsy shop that I wanted you to know. I did a video a while back on everything I had to do to set up my Etsy shop, but I also wanted to do a follow-up video because I think there's a lot more ground to cover. I've also talked to some tax pros on this channel, so if you want to know more about that, check out those videos. I talked to Mark II with Not Your Dad CPA and Sarah Kornack with Small Business Sarah. They were super helpful, but I'm seeing a lot of these same questions floating around on the internet, and I wanted to try to answer some of them because a lot of the answers to very common questions are found directly on the Etsy website. So we're going to go over some of that. I also wanted to make a quick disclaimer. This is not business, legal, or financial advice. I am not an Etsy expert. I'm just coming at you from someone who's had an Etsy shop for a while. Also, down below in the comments, let me know if you're an Etsy shop owner, what are some tips you would have for beginners, and what are some things that you wish you knew when starting your shop that you would have, gone back, maybe done some things differently, because I think there's a lot of folks out there that I know can be really exciting, the idea of having your own Etsy shop, making money, just working from home, but there's a lot more to it, and that's what I wanted to get into. And I would highly advise, well, obviously the thing you need to do before you open your Etsy shop is research. That's the number one thing. Lots and lots of research, hopefully using videos, resources like this. But I wanted to really walk you guys through a lot of the resources straight from Etsy. I mean, that's the source. So if you're opening an Etsy shop and you have not read the Etsy Seller Handbook, that's the first thing I will be getting into. I would highly recommend you do that. Also, I would just like to point out, well, I think videos like this one are helpful. Please don't use this as the end all be all. Don't stop your research here. Keep going and learn as much as you can. And also a caveat that, while people like me are making videos and we have good intentions, obviously some of this advice does not translate depending on your location or situation. Please seek out a qualified professional and don't just go by information you see on the internet. I'm seeing that a lot too, and I think that could be a little bit dangerous because some advice you get online might generally be good, but also might not work for your specific situation. The first thing I want to get to, and I'm going to link some resources down below in the description box, so check that. There is literally a page where it says how to open an Etsy shop. So they go over what you're allowed to sell on Etsy. And yes, there are things you're allowed and not allowed to sell on Etsy. They do have quite a few prohibited items. So this is something that you should be doing in your research phase, is thinking of what you want to make and sell. And also, is this allowed on Etsy? There are definitely some things that are not allowed to be sold on Etsy. You are not allowed to resell items unless they are vintage or craft supplies. And even then there are certain items that are just flat out prohibited. Another question I see a lot, do you need a business license to sell on Etsy? Now, while Etsy itself as a platform does not require sellers to have a business license, the place you may live may require you to. So even though Etsy may not ask for that information when it's onboarding you, depending on where you're located, your city, state, county, or even country may require you to have a business license or go through some other protocol if you are going to be operating an Etsy shop. You need to Google how to start a business in whatever location you are. So I'm in Tampa. So I Googled how to start a business in Tampa, Florida, and I found some great information. Your city may require you to have a business license. You may not be required to have a business license. It really depends, and there is no one-size-fits-all answer to that question. But if you live in New York City, I'm going to guess there is a city, some sort of city permit requirement. I'm outside the Tampa limits, so I do not have to have something with the city, but I did have to have something with my county and with the state of Florida. So you need to research that, and you're going to have to do that off of Etsy. Even call, if you live in a specific county, your county probably has some small business office. You can probably call them or email them, ask questions, and see what you need to do to be operating legally. It also depends on if you are going to be buying, like say you're making something and you want to buy supplies straight from wholesalers, you're probably going to need some sort of business resale license. And at that point, you probably are going to have some sort of business license with your local entity in order to get that tax-free status. But then you're also going to have to be filing reports with your state to remit sales tax and whatnot, which again, we'll get into that later because Etsy does collect can remit sales tax for quite a few states in the United States, but it really depends on where you are. I would highly recommend that you check these pages out before you do anything. And I would also say this, I'm not trying to be harsh, but I'm seeing this a lot, especially on Reddit. There's a couple forums, there's r/Etsy and r/Etsy sellers. Just day after day, you see the same like 3 questions come up. It's usually stuff about taxes. Do you need a business license to operate? And there's also a lot of intellectual property questions, and also people that don't understand the Etsy fees. Just from my own experience with Etsy, I would tell you, if you are in that situation and you don't understand those things, I would not start your Etsy shop yet. Make sure you know about those things, know about Etsy's terms of service before you get started, because there are some ramifications for you if you're not operating the right way. And you want to make sure that if you do open an Etsy shop, you're doing everything properly and you're not giving Etsy a reason to kick you off, because we will talk about that, because Etsy can and has terminated shops. So let me bring this up real quick, because this is going to be super helpful. And I've noticed on the subreddits, when people are like asking a lot of questions, the number one answer is be sure to read the Etsy seller handbook. Literally directly on the Etsy website. It's so easy laid out. It's advice and inspiration for successfully running your Etsy shop. And they go over everything from photography to getting found with search engine optimization, branding and marketing, shipping, the legal stuff. That's super important. Pricing, taxes, and finance. And I want to really also get into the legal aspects. This is kind of new. Etsy has a whole new section on intellectual property. And that is ridiculously important, because I'm seeing literally like tons of questions on people who don't understand it and are probably violating the Etsy policies. And that's something that can not only get you banned off of Etsy, but it can also get you sued. So intellectual property is when you come up with something or you create something, that is your intellectual property. Say I'm a cartoonist and I make cartoons or something. If I create a unique character, that belongs to me. If someone else tried to rip me off, say maybe took that character and then tried to sell t-shirts with that character on it that I created, they're violating my intellectual property. I really didn't want to do this sort of topic unless I could either get an attorney, or in this case, I'm comfortable talking about it because we're just going to go straight off of what Etsy tells us. So let me just bring that back up. Intellectual property is something that affects more people than you might think, especially when you take into consideration a lot of the crafts and things that people make are based off of another idea. Like if I've done some BTS DIY projects. Now that's something I make for personal use, but there's no way I can sell it. So that's why I do not sell patterns for the BTS Army logo, and I do not sell anything BTS related or inspired on my Etsy shop, because that is a violation of intellectual property. Intellectual property is a type of properties for which creators and makers have certain ownership rights. Something can have more than one type of IP at the same time, and someone can create new IP even if it builds upon another IP. It's a complex area, but every seller should understand it. And guys, I'm telling you, you need to go over this if you don't understand it. Common types of intellectual property are copyrights and trademarks. Now, copyrights is more the actual work itself, like a Disney princess cartoon, Harry Potter artwork, that type of thing, movie screenshots, photographs. Trademarks more go into the branding. So even if I create something that doesn't necessarily violate the copyright, I cannot use a brand's trademark to market the product in any way. So if I make a, say, sweater that's purple and black and says I purple you or something, which is kind of a common BTS Army thing, I cannot use BTS Army, anything like that in the title, description of the item, or the tags. And that's something I see people seem to not understand. They're like, oh, well, I drew this fan art and I didn't use their intellectual property, I'm good. But the problem they run into is that they're using someone else's intellectual property. They're profiting off of it by using their trademarks to market it. Because obviously, if someone was going to be looking for BTS stuff on Etsy, my shop may come up if I were to try to sell like like BTS Army sweaters or something, but I'm basically profiting off of Big Hit or Hybe's intellectual property by using that trademark because people are searching for it. This series is super helpful, and I would really, really recommend you go over this because I'm seeing a lot of posts on Reddit. They're like, well, I wasn't violating IP. And then when you get more details, it's very clear that they were, but they just didn't know it. There's even a really helpful post about fan art and fair use. I can tell you, I used to be a TV producer for newsrooms. Fair use is a very, very, very complicated topic, and there's not a lot of black and white. So I've seen a lot of misinformation floating around about fair use, especially in pertaining to YouTube stuff. And I'm seeing a lot of particularly young people that have very skewed misconceptions on what it is and how it's applied. So just know that if you are hand making items to sell on Etsy, it's against Etsy's terms of service for you to be violating intellectual property. And what typically ends up happening is that these big brands like Marvel, Disney, Harry Potter stuff, they have lawyers who look for violations online. Then they would reach out to Etsy, and then Etsy needs to take action. So I've seen post after post on Reddit of people who were violating IP or trademark stuff. They ended up getting contacted by some brand's attorney. That's not fun. You can get your Etsy shop banned. You can even be sued. There's other types of legal action that can be taken against you. Pretty serious stuff. You really don't want to get messed up in intellectual property violations. There's a big myth. So it says myth number 2, fair use always protects fan art. No, that's just not at all true. It does not protect people who sell fan art. There's also like a myth that if you change a work a certain percentage, that it's fine by fair use, and it's not. If you're thinking about making something, you can't really do like inspired by or, sell like knockoffs or just exact copies of stuff. If you make anything and the potential customer sees it and is like, oh, I'm reminded of this, there's a pretty good chance that you are violating someone's intellectual property, whether it be a movie or a book quote, something that's tied to a TV show, a popular character, a toy, anything, a brand. This covers so much stuff that I know a lot of people like to make, particularly young people. Like I've seen people try to sell like Minecraft stuff, or, a lot of moms trying to sell Disney type things like with the Disney font, or like mouse ears. That can be pretty risky. So I just wanted to put that out there because that is something I've wanted to talk about for a long time. But now that Etsy has kind of an official guide to it, I really want to point you guys to that because, that's really the source. That's where you got to go to. And just a side note too about Reddit, I'm a lurker on Reddit. I typically do not post or comment just because in my opinion, I think Reddit is just a really toxic environment overall. And if you do comment or post anything, just be prepared to be attacked no matter how innocuous you think it may be. You just see a lot of the same type of posts, people looking for advice on, social media, how to get your shop found, things like that. But I'm just noticing a lot of the people posting on Etsy and Etsy sellers, the answer to their question is actually in that Etsy seller's handbook. These subreddits can be helpful to follow if you just lurk. If you have a question, I would, there's a little search bar up here. There's probably a pretty good chance that somebody else has asked that question or ran into that specific situation. Check that first before but yeah, be very wary about posting just because people can be so nasty on Reddit. I just find this is probably the most toxic form of social media. I think it's worse than Facebook. There can be some helpful information. I do find it valuable in that people are usually talking about whatever the latest that's going on. That's how I found out about the Etsy transaction fee. Also, I got the email, but it is kind of helpful for staying in the know about what's going on with Etsy. I would just highly suggest that you keep a low profile there and don't really post or comment, just kind of look at stuff. That's sort of what I found as far as getting value out of a Reddit. But no matter what you post there, you're going to get really hateful trolls or people who are just miserable with life. And if you don't really want to deal with that and you don't want to have that type of stress, then I would recommend just looking at stuff. I've seen so many, they sound like young people and they'll be asking a question like, I'm trying to make Lego accessories or something. And it's good they're asking the question, but it's pretty clear that a lot of people who are looking to start an Etsy shop or people who already do have an Etsy shop really know nothing about intellectual property. And many of them seem to be violating a lot of those policies. And that can get you into some deep, deep trouble. In fact, I saw a video on YouTube. I'll link that below as well because I did think it was pretty interesting. There was a woman, she sold soaps and like skincare products and bath stuff on her own website. I believe she may have also had an Etsy shop, and she had a company send her a pretty scary letter about trademark violation, and she walked through the whole process on what happened to her, and she ended up having to get an attorney and pay that company some money. And she explained the situation. As far as like if they went to court, I feel like this lady probably would have had a decent shot of winning her case. But then it comes down to how much money do you want to spend in legal fees to defend yourself when you might have just, it was easier for her and cheaper to just pay that company a little bit of money, and she ended up just taking that name off of all her products. But I'll link that below because it was pretty interesting. There's a lot of people who are on Etsy who may be in some hot water with some of that stuff. I think they don't think it can happen to them. And I also think they don't realize, they feel like somewhat insulated because it's through like this online platform. It's kind of may feel a little bit anonymous. There can be some real consequences for violating intellectual property that I don't think people think about, and they don't understand that they could be taken to court, can have your shop banned forever. And from what I can tell from people who have recounted having their shops banned, it's next to impossible to have another Etsy shop. They do match up all of your information, like your financials, they have to match. They track IP addresses. You cannot use a virtual private network or a VPN with Etsy. So that's something, because we have a VPN and I didn't realize you couldn't use it. But if Etsy detects you having a VPN, you can actually get booted there as well. There's also certain countries that you cannot open an Etsy shop. Etsy is limited to certain countries or areas. So sometimes I think people from those restricted countries try to use a VPN to get around it, or they try to use somebody else's bank account and that sort of thing. And that is like actually against Etsy policies. If you're going to open an Etsy shop, you absolutely should go over the Etsy terms of use pretty carefully. So I'm going to link this below as well. I mean, they really lay it out pretty clearly. Again, they can boot you if they want. It's pretty clear. Etsy does not owe you a lot. They also lay out the fees and everything. You must be 18 years or older to use the services. If you are under 18, you are not supposed to have an Etsy shop in your name. They also have a separate post on this as well. I have seen young people ask about opening an Etsy shop, and according to Etsy, minors under 18 and at least 13 years of age are only permitted to use our services through an account owned by a parent or legal guardian with their appropriate permission and under direct supervision. Children under 13 actually are not supposed to be using Etsy at all. Obviously, this is for liability reasons. You are responsible for any and all activity conducted by a minor on your account, and there may be commercial products or services available that you may want to consider to limit a minor's access to material online. Be honest with us. Yeah, if you provide false information to Etsy, like on who you are or on any of your information, that's against the terms of service. So there's a lot that you need to know before you just start doing business with Etsy, because you may be unknowingly violating these policies, and you want to make sure that you kind of read the fine print. I know nobody likes to read the fine print, but that is important. This is fairly simple. I don't feel like this is super obtuse or anything. Details disputes with other users, disputes with Etsy. You agree that you are going to go through arbitration. When you sign up for this, you are agreeing that you will not sue Etsy. If you have a legal dispute, you have to use arbitration. And a lot of big companies do this. This is not at all unusual. If you're under 13, you're not supposed to be using Etsy at all. And I've seen some young people ask on the Etsy subreddits what they should do if they want to start an Etsy shop, but they're not 18. So if you're between 13 and 17, you can operate an Etsy shop if your parent or guardian owns the shop. So they have to put their name on it. It has to be linked to their bank accounts, their financials. But also keep in mind, now, if you're a parent watching this and one of your kids wants to start an Etsy shop, you might be like, okay, that's cool. Little, Jill wants to open an Etsy shop. I'll just sign up under my name. I think that's cool. And if you want to do that, go ahead. Think about more long-term ramifications though as well. So the Etsy shop cannot be transferred or sold. Say you want to open an Etsy shop for your child. When they turn 18, you cannot transfer the Etsy shop to them at all. They would have to start a new Etsy shop if they want to be the owner for it. Also, for the whole life of the shop, it has to be linked to your banking information. Everything has to match up with your ID, not your kid's ID. Also, you are on the hook for all of the tax ramifications. So you have the tax burden. So you would have to figure out once your kid turns 18 how you're going to work that out. I know people kind of don't think that far down the line, but it is something to keep in mind that if you're helping your child open an Etsy shop, it can never belong to your kid, even if they're the one operating it. If you're close to 18, like if you're 16 or 17, I've seen people recommend to kids to just wait until they're 18. And I think that's generally a pretty good idea. I mean, you can use that time. You can get better at whatever you're making. You can get everything kind of set up. You can do more research. Maybe you can make things that you can put on as listings once you turn 18. But if you're a minor, realize that if you open an Etsy shop and you do it in your parent or guardian's name, that can never be changed. So you can never have the money going into your bank account. Your parent or guardian is going to always be responsible for the taxes on it. It might just be easier and in the long run, just a better strategy just to wait until you're legally allowed to open your own Etsy shop. Because yeah, I didn't realize this, but you can never transfer the Etsy shop to anyone else. The other thing to keep in mind is, I know nobody wants to talk about this, but working with family and friends doesn't always end well. Used to work in news. You saw a lot of crimes happening between family members, close friends. It does happen. I know most parents obviously would not do anything to hurt their kid or to steal from them or anything like that, but there are some people who would, and clearly that does happen every once in a while. The other thing is having that income reported on your own social security number or tax ID number means there will be some tax implications for you that might affect if you're getting any sort of assistance, if you are trying to apply for loans or whatnot. So that's going to affect your financials. So if you are agreeing to open an Etsy shop that someone else is going to run, but it's in your name, regardless of what happens, you're going to be affected. I think there's some good things about a kid learning to have a small business and opening an Etsy shop. But down the line, you have to remember that once your kid turns 18, they can never own that shop. So they can either open another one. Some partnerships with family members don't always work out. Let's just be honest about that. Some things can happen. You can never transfer that Etsy shop, and that is a pretty big deal. And if you're under 13, just know you're not supposed to be using Etsy at all. Let's take a look at the Etsy fees, because that is a pretty important part about being on Etsy. As we all know, starting on April 11th, they are increasing the 5% transaction fee to 6.5%. There's also other fees they charge. There is a payment processing fee, and there is currently a 20-cent listing fee. Also, just note that this information may change, definitely subject to change in the future. For every sale you make, you're going to have 20 cents deducted. If you auto renew your listing, like if you have 5 of something, there's also going to be a payment processing fee, the transaction fee, and depending on where the order is, Etsy may collect and remit sales tax for you. Now, I did get somebody asking me this question in regard to income tax and reporting income for your tax purposes. Etsy does not withhold income tax, so these are two separate things. So Etsy collects and remits sales tax for many states within the US, and I believe they also do VAT tax in the EU. I'm not super well versed on anything outside of the United States, so if you're not US based, this video probably won't be super helpful, but definitely check out some other resources for your specific location. As far as the income tax goes, now we talked about this with Mark Two and with Sarah Karnak. In the past, for a lot of these online payment processors, the threshold for reporting this income to the IRS automatically used to be about $20,000 for many states, but starting this year, so 2022, they're now required. So all payment processors, I believe with the exception of Zelle, because technically they're not like a payment processor, they're just like kind of a direct transfer kind of company. But most companies like PayPal, eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Etsy, they're now required to report to the IRS transactions totaling $600 or more. That's pretty low. Definitely a big drop from $20,000. My shop, under the old rule, would not have had a 1099 1099K form submitted to the IRS under the new rule of $600? Absolutely. Well, I think there's been a lot of folks who didn't quite understand all of the tax implications of having the Etsy shop. Just know that if in the past you haven't been reporting this income, you are no longer going to be able to fly under the radar because the IRS is automatically going to know. Now, we can debate how good or bad this is all day long. It's here and it's happening and we're going to have to deal with it. You need to understand the tax stuff. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have literally no clue how the fees work, how the taxes work, sales and income tax, and you don't really understand the Etsy rules, I would highly advise you to wait on opening the Etsy shop until you understand these things. Because I've seen a lot of people online who have an Etsy shop, have been kind of not knowing what's going on. They get panicked because they get in a jam with one of these issues and they didn't take the time before they started the shop to do any of this research. So that's why I think doing the research on opening an Etsy shop is so important, especially with some of this tax stuff. The IRS does not play around. And when Etsy remits this 1099K, you're going to get a copy of it. The IRS is going to get a copy of it. If you do not report that income on your taxes, the IRS is definitely going to know. You will certainly be hearing from them on the income you did not report. This also means you need to be keeping track of your expenses and your finances. I've seen a lot of particularly smaller shops who are pretty upset about this because they don't want to spend $25 a month on QuickBooks or whatever. I would highly recommend going over to Not Your Dad CPA and Small Business Sarah Cornick. They both have really good resources on bookkeeping for small businesses. So if you're small and you don't have the money to pay a CPA or an accountant or for QuickBooks, you're going to have to DIY this. And you don't really have the option of not doing this because if you don't do that, you're going to be in pretty deep trouble come tax time because you're not going to have any clue what your business finances are like. If you cannot do that, then I would recommend you don't start an Etsy shop because that is a really important thing to do. And if you're definitely going to be getting a 1099K if you make over $600 in the entire year. And if you don't keep track of any of that stuff, you're going to have to pay taxes on the gross if you don't know your expenses. So if you know the expenses, then you can say, hey, I made $10,000, but my expenses were $6,000. Then you only have to pay taxes on you only have to pay taxes on the profit, but you also have to be able to prove and show the IRS what your expenses were. So if you don't keep track of any of that stuff, you have no way to prove to the IRS what your expenses are. So then you will be forced to pay taxes on, say, the $10,000 versus the $4,000 if you have $6,000 worth of expenses. There's lots of resources out there. I'm not trying to be harsh, but I am trying to not sugarcoat things. Quite frankly, if you're not someone that's even going to bother to do that, then I would really hesitate on starting an Etsy shop. This may not be right for you. Having a small online business is a lot of work. And one thing I would like to point out too is that there's so many videos out there, blog posts like, I made 6 figures my first year on Etsy. It's really easy money working from home. My own personal experience, it is not easy money. While I am selling supplies, so I'm not even selling things that I make and sell. So my labor time is pretty low compared to handmade businesses that may sell things like zippered pouches or quilts or something. I spent a lot of time trying to make sure that my books are in order, doing research, doing all these business licenses and stuff. I would say anyone who says it's easy money is delusional. It's not. I think for the vast majority of shops and other Etsy sellers out there, you could probably attest to this. It's definitely not the definition of easy and fast money. So I think some of those things out there can be a little bit misleading because it's giving someone this false sense of like, oh, this is going to happen right away. I also see a lot of posts on the subreddit like, I've had my Etsy shop open for 2 weeks and I haven't gotten any sales. Now, when I started my Etsy shop, I had over 50,000 YouTube subscribers. I have a pretty active presence on like TikTok and Instagram. I was driving most of the traffic to my Etsy shop. Like about the first year of Etsy, I've gotten some sales, but nothing crazy. And as far as the finances go, I'm about breaking even with my shop. I'm not rolling in money. It's anything but easy. It's a lot of work compared to the other things I do, just because I have to keep very close track of the business expenses. Again, I had to get a reseller license so that I could buy things wholesale, because when I've gotten accounts with like fabric manufacturers or distributors, they require me to submit my reseller certificate. Otherwise, they won't sell sell to me. So I had to get a business license. I had to get the reseller certificate. In fact, I'm now an LLC. So I had to do a lot of things and I had to spend some money in order to get all of those designations. I'm paying a CPA. So there are a lot of costs associated with just keeping track of all the finances. Now, there are cheaper ways to do this, especially if you're on the smaller side, but you have to be willing to put in that work to do it. If you're not a numbers person and you cannot afford an accountant or a tax pro, you're going to run into some problems. You're most likely going to have some issues. So those are just some of the big things that I think people should know about. And because everyone is like, that sees you when you make stuff or when you sell something, like, oh, you should just sell those on Etsy. And yes, that sounds great, but you also have to think about all of the work that's around the Etsy shop, and it can be pretty significant. So I just wanted to kind of have this be kind of a reality check. Etsy is, in my opinion, it's not an easy way to make money. If I wanted an easy way to make money, I could go down to McDonald's. They're probably hiring at $18 an hour at this point, and that would be easier money. I don't have to worry about doing the books for McDonald's unless I'm working there as an accountant or a manager or something. And that would probably be per hour, I would probably be making more money. And as far as my own traffic to the Etsy shop, it took well over a year for me to start getting more organic traffic through Etsy without me directing customers there from my own social media platforms. But it does take some time, it seems. And this is pretty similar, in my opinion, to YouTube. It takes quite a while for your channel to get traction. And I would say that's been pretty true from my experience as an Etsy shop owner as well. You really have to be pretty tight with your title description. Good photographs are really important. Etsy does have a really wide basket of customers, lots of people shopping there. So you do get a lot of good potential foot traffic, but you also have to figure out, is what I'm selling, is this something people are looking for? Is this something people want? Also, is my item profitable? When I first started out blogging about sewing and quilting, I did an article called Quiltonomics talking about the business of selling quilts. And unfortunately, all of the time and energy and materials that go into a quilt, it's kind of hard to sell them at a fair price because they're so labor intensive and most people don't have the budget to buy a handmade quilt, because if I sold quilts, I'd have to sell them for thousands of dollars to make it worthwhile. And I know that's a very limited market of people. You also need to really think about pricing your items correctly so that people are still willing to pay for them, but you also make enough profit that it's worth your time. And the other thing I see from a lot of new shop owners is that they don't take all of those costs into account. I've seen some handmade sewn items that seem priced really way too low. And a lot of folks too, just commenting on my other videos, people honestly did not know about the tax implications. They didn't know they had to pay taxes on the income from their Etsy shop. Look, I know you don't know what you don't know, but if you're gonna be operating an Etsy shop, you're gonna be treated as a business owner, and there are some pros, there are cons, and there are consequences if you don't follow the rules, and especially with all of the tax stuff. I mean, and if you're younger, especially, if you are going to be opening a shop and you don't know this stuff and you get hit with one of these penalties or consequences, you may feel like a kid, but running a business is a very adult thing and it has adult consequences. So please know that you being young, that's not an excuse for you not doing these things, not knowing. So that's why I want to do this video, is to really encourage you watching who are considering starting an Etsy shop, or maybe you started the Etsy shop, but you kind of realize you don't know what you're doing. Please do this research. Don't just stop at this video. Read this seller's handbook, because it does have a lot of really great information in it straight from Etsy, because I don't want people to start an Etsy shop and run into some of these issues, because it's not going to be fun. It can lead to a lawsuit. You could also get hit by the IRS. Again, I'm not trying to sound all doomsday, but I am trying to give you a reality check. And there are some things that you need to be aware of and that you need to be doing to operate your business so that you can continue to operate your business and be successful. Anyways, I'm Jen with the Sewing Report. If you did find this video helpful, let me know down below in the comments, and be sure to hit the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see some of my previous Etsy videos, I will link them up here and down below in the description box. I'll see you guys again in the next video. And remember, whatever you're doing, make it fun.